This miniature was previously primed with an airbrush using Vallejo's matte black primer, followed by a mix of golden cerulean blue hue and indigo from their high flow acrylics line. A zenithal spray was then applied using golden's teal, and finally a lesser zenithal spray of said teal mixed with 1:1 with Dalerani's titanium white ink. These colors can be dry brushed if you do not have an airbrush. These blue paints will be used for the foundation for the blue clothing and the white nurse's smock. The rest of the work will be done by hand. The painting of the flesh will not be shown, though the colors used will be provided in a spreadsheet excerpt shown at the end of this video. As a separate note, all acrylic paints, except the wash and inks, were thinned with a little bit of golden super matte medium. After the base coat of the hair has been finished, I apply the first layer highlight, picking out large individual strands, much like an edge highlight. The second highlight is done in the same manner, though covering less area. Though you can't tell from this camera angle, I'm only coming down about 2/3 of the way, as I did with the previous highlight, placing this one more on top of the head than on the sides or bottom. The third highlight, I cover even less area than before, though I also begin to apply this color between the individually highlighted strands, connecting them in the reflective sheen of natural hair. The final highlight is done in the same manner, though centered in the previous one. This last layer is applied with more of a stippling dab as opposed to full brush strokes. I will return to the hair later, but for now I move on to the clothing, applying a mix of dark blue and violet to add the darkest shadows for what will later be all of the blue and white clothing. Since the airbrush covered several layers of highlights for me already, I only apply a couple of highlights with the brush, and these are mostly done in short hatching lines. Like the hair, I'll return to the blue clothing later on in the video, but now I move on to the leather components. The order of the parts I'm painting was chosen so that I'm working from the deepest elements, working my way outwards. Painting the flesh last without accidentally getting paint on her garments would have been difficult, so for once I planned this out ahead of time to make my life easier. The leather items are painted much in the same manner that I painted the leathers for my two previous videos, though I cut in some purple and reds to give some variation to the tone. I also use a larger raggedy brush wherever I can for the base coat, as it can help add some irregular scratchy lines. The last two highlights are added to the medical bag with irregular hatching lines to help lend an air of a worn material. Again, like the hair and blue garments, we stop here for the leather and we'll return to it later, but for now I move on to the white smock. And it wasn't until I got to this step that this miniature started to feel like it was getting close to being done. Even though everything else was roughly 90% finished, the unpainted smock made the blue clothing feel as though it hadn't been even started yet. As I apply the off-white highlight, I remain diligent not to completely cover all of the blue, leaving some of it to act as my shadows. I paint the base and pistol off camera, which oddly enough looks like a Glock, but it's 1947 in the dust world. You know what, never mind that. But from here, I apply a tiny amount of these 3 transparent inks from Liquitex. The brown is applied as the darkest shadow for the leathers and hair, the blue for the darkest of shadows for the rest of the clothing, and the yellow as a tint on the hair's highlights, though I do leave just a little bit of the off-white highlight untouched in the center of the sheen line for the hair. I finish the miniature off by creating some chalk dust from various colored chalk sticks, then mix them and apply them with a worn out brush. I then use another clean worn out brush to dust away the chalk, leaving a dusty, worn finish. This is the end result. I was tempted to add some tufts to the base but decided against it, as for all of my Dust 1947 Mercenary bases are done so as if they're deep in a desert flatland, similar to California's Death Valley, where vegetation is sparse. The flesh came out okay in the end, but was mainly not shown here due to all of the back and forth I had to do to get it where I was happy enough. I also realized while editing this video I forgot to add a little bit of shadow to the red cross on the hat. The biggest issues I have are around the nose, and also around the hands, with the latter still showing some of the original blues from the airbrush work, where I didn't get enough paint coverage to hide this. I'll have to come back with some thinned down strong tone or dark tone washes from Army Painter and gradually darken around to cover these. Originally, I did not like the eyes being so narrow, which I attributed to her being of Asian descent. My issue with it is not with her ethnicity, since I myself am Asian, but rather that it made it next to impossible for me to paint the eyes to where you would even see the pupils. In the end result, however, and having recently seen Hacksaw Ridge, I now attribute this to more of her having not fired a gun much, and she's still flinching during the initial trigger pulls, as many novices with firearms are wont to do. My last note on this video is I had to retake the pictures with my Canon camera several times, as I'm still playing with my exposure settings. I haven't started to try to correct the colors and light exposures with Adobe Lightroom yet, as I may not start doing that until next year, instead trying to get the lighting as best as I can from the start to minimize any editing. And of course I keep waxing and waning with everything too dark or too bright, and the shadows are all but washed out. And with all that rambling, I'm going to bring this video to its end. I hope you learned something or were inspired to start or expand your own collection of Dust 1947 miniatures. Never mind that it's a dead game. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and if you like the content of this video and would like to see more, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm Jim with Working with Miniatures. I'm truly grateful for your time, and I bid you a fond farewell. Until the next video.